Welcome to Dweller of the Dark. We are a channel honoring the yellowed and blackened bones of many prominent authors. We will be digging up several obscure, strange, and forgotten authors who influenced many of the great horror, science fiction, and fantasy writers today. More tales of the horrifying, obscure, strange, and forgotten are climbing out of the tombs. Subscribe, comment, like, donate, or I'll send Thaddeus Forge to steal your heathen soul. Unknown horror masters, send us ghoulish delights for the Skull and Bones collection. Your pound of writer's flesh will continue to feed our ghouls for now. Books, websites, podcasts, in the links below. Children of Horror, Legion of Ghouls. Tonight, this one is wholeheartedly dedicated to you bloodthirsty fiends of the dark. Creatures in Scotland, like the soon-to-be published Stephen Sinclair. From the gates of hell, the Legion Master, ARW-CWB. Across the Arizona desert, the stalking skinwalker, Thomas Swafford. The ghastly haunter of the dead, Phantom Generator 237. And in those dark seas, the Leviathan that makes Jaws scared to enter the water, Sharky Sharkins. But especially to all you horrific boils and ghouls, thanks for your continued support. A second blood-curdling scream to my fellow writers, judges, and jurists of the HWA. Long may your life fires burn brightly and eternal. I present a seafaring tale in that dastardly of colors, crimson. I submitted this epic story chosen from a pre-approved list of characters that we could spin a ghastly yarn from. The legend of Long John Silver and the bats of the blood tide roared out as a horde of hellion bats. Our vampire pirate tale made it to the Horror Writers Association shortlist for their Scaring and Daring Adventures Anthology Contest 2023. As stated by the HWA judges in the final selection. Arthur, please know that although this submission, The Legend of Long John Silver and the Bats of the Blood Tide, was not accepted, you made it into the very final round of consideration, i.e., the top level of the shortlist, meaning for all intents that this story was exceptional in many ways. Only 18 stories were held for this final round of deliberation. HWA judges Scaring and Daring Adventures. Boils and ghouls, I was honored to get shortlisted for this bloody tale. You can bet your bats that I'll be releasing this one in some sort of collection soon. Of course, the book, as always, will be written in blood to the Children of Horror and Legion of Ghouls. The Legend of Long John Silver and the Bats of the Blood Tide by Jeffrey LeBlanc. I, Captain Long John Silver, with fiery torch and hemlock stake, drove the winged devils back into the fathoms ere the daybreak. Captain Jim Yellowbeard Hawkins.
Red skies by night! Red skies by night!
Squawked the emerald green parrot, Captain Flint, from the slouching and irritated shoulder of her captain master.
Are my feathered friend, that they be, but these red skies and blood tides be no delight.
Captain Long John Silver lurched his towering frame on his hemlock crutch and looked out squinting on the horizon. Shifting his weight to readjust at the captain's wheel, he lifted a golden spyglass he had in his breast pocket and studied a heaving structure on the red pirate, tender and shot. Between dipping and lunging across line and small cannon, the stoic captain never lost sight of the Bloodhawk, as its silhouette loomed as a reaching dark hand behind the waning red smear of the setting sun. The man, whose face had stayed ageless despite long days sailing under blue skies, moved with the grace of a stalking panther. With the agility of a wild goat, he nimbly maneuvered with Captain Flint, squawking of treasure and tides on his shoulder. With the leap of a satyr or the launch of a fawn, he reached the starboard bow and pivoted on a rail. He shouted curses and sang a sea shanty as the crew launched ropes to snag the Bloodhawk. The crest and the wave made you the devil's slave, but Albert Henri, you never thought Long John would capture the knave. I'd say by the bow, you'd go to the locker beneath the main, but a bloodlusting heathen like you wouldn't fear that pain. So I'll rack your wicked wings to the crow's nest, my friend. From the gibbet and the line, your corpse will burn under sun for your sins. He put his calloused right hand over his brow to shade his eyes of ocean blue. Adjusting his leathered hat and pushing back a strand of silver and red hair, he peered out at the Bloodhawk with a tight bearded grin. He spotted a key place to launch the hooks and shouted excitedly, "Scoundrels and scallywags, throw the lines here on our port bow. And gentlemen, watch your necks." His heart leaped with joyous anticipation, but in the same instant, Long John clenched his teeth at the listing ship with unnerving dread. Tattered and ripped sails, unfastened moorings, and the charred captain's quarters made the old pirate bite down his aged jaw. hastily throwing around his neck.
You said a she, though. Did a woman best you?
Captain Long John Silver winced at his too smart for his own good Jim Hawkins. There was no way Jim was going to let it go. He'd find out one way or the other. He sighed and gave a wry grin to Jim.
Duchess Annabelle Henri, be the she, fine sir. That vixen, the daughter of Lord Henri, nearly got me, young Jim. Her kiss almost stole more than my ship.
Yucky roo, Captain Silver. A girl's kiss would make me lose my hardtack and grog. Jim Hawkins made a retching gesture and pretended to throw up over the side. Long John had a fit of bellowing laughter at his antics.
You'll see the yucky girls a little different when you're older, Jim Hawkins, as we are.
Captain Long John wiped his eyes in mirth and set to tell his tale as the crew ready to board.
I was a young man, just 4 years older than you are now, Jim Hawkins. I met Annabelle.
Long John spoke briefly and with purpose, glossing over the more intimate details of his tryst with the beautiful Duchess. In earnest, he wanted to avoid more comical outbursts from Jim. He explained how it was 20 years ago when the Bloodhawk had been the star-gemmed prize for an ambitious Captain Long John Silver. It had been his only love and all he ever desired. Well, maybe just a few other trivial things. A keg of rum, a chest of gold, and of course, a brilliant star to sail his beloved Bloodhawk by, had been his only other meager wants.
My Bloodhawk had been stolen from me by that dog, Albert Henri. But to add to my woes, Annabelle Henri stole my heart. Neither were thieves, nor were they pirates. That bunch was something far, far worse to get the drop on me and my crew back then. And while I've told the crew he stole my ship, I will never tell them everything or how much of a fool I was. Or I'd certainly have another mutiny on my hands.
So, you sailed the Cape of Good Horn when you ran into them, Captain Silver? Jim asked, with a raised right brow and pursed lips, puzzled.
Jim, it be so. They were on another sinking ship. That'd be the galleon, 15-cannon galleon Neptune. I'd have brought her ashore as another regal prize, but you know the swells and storms of that accursed cape. We'd have certainly ran low into Davy Jones' locker if I had been a reckless captain, which I've never been.
He paused a minute, watching his crew lay planks across to board the Bloodhawk.
But I should have sent something dark.
Could see the boy had become a little jumpier now that the crew was pushing forth to search for contraband, maybe treasure, and for sure any stores, especially if those stores proved to be the spiced Caribbean rum.
You have the silver musket I gave thee, Jim Hawkins.
Jim nodded to him and raised his vest, showing the pistol snug, secure in his belt. Then he showed Long John the dagger that had once belonged to the nefarious Israel Hand. It was the same one that Hand had used to try and kill him.
Good. I have one more item for you, my pirating apprentice, that you will need.
No sooner had Long John provided Jim Hawkins with his latest gift that the undead crew of the Bloodhawk unleashed their fanged attack. Swarms of bats flew up out of the hold as Salem, Stevenson, and Black Dog had pulled up the doors, barring the lower hatch.
as they twisted and writhed with lanterns in front of them. A gray set of hands lifted to pull Salem down into the darkness of the hold. Everyone heard his screams and a splatter of something down in the pitch of the below deck. Black Dog scrambled from the open storage hold. He kicked in a convulsed panic at two bats that were far larger than your average brown and gray bat. Long John watched in horror as the yeoman fumbled and slipped on something shimmering black and gelatinous. It was then, and only then, under the brilliant orange light of torches and lanterns, that Captain Silver realized the whole deck were littered with the dead and decaying crew of the Bloodhawk. Mercy to God! They truly be monsters on this ship. Wide-eyed, Captain Silver hobbled on his one leg, avoiding a slip that would certainly prove less than fortuitous. Mind your wits, men. Torch the bats and send fire into that hold. We'll burn the villains out and I must concede that over the years, I grew annoyed at her constant references to you. You don't have to fight us.
The vampire looked around as he saw his vampires being dispatched by various means. Garlic to the face, holy water to the eyes, and cutlass swipes to end them all. All these tactics Long John had trained his men in over the years he hunted for Lord Henri. He made sure to leave nothing to chance. Join us, Captain, and be the dreaded scourge to the seven seas that you have always dreamed to be. Let me go. Captain Silver heard a boy's voice, Jim Hawkins' voice, scream out. In a terrified rage, he turned to see that his beloved Annabelle had gripped the foolish boy by his neck as a cat might a mouse. Captain Silver, tell her to let me go. I don't want to hurt your lady friend. Both the vampires had laughed hysterically and wickedly at Jim's warning. And, just as Israel Hand had learned to his demise, their laughter had been a mistake. Captain Long John Silver screamed out his own warning to both. I do as he says, Annabelle. He's a mite small, I agree, and poses no threat to your devilish ilk. Besides, he'd be less than a meal anyway. On those words, Long John winked at Annabelle, who looked more than confused. The brave Jim Hawkins knew Captain Silver's wink all too well. He drove the silver-handled ash stake, Long John's earlier gift to the boy, straight into Annabelle's blackest heart. The staked vampire fell back in shock and turned to centered ash. No! Screamed an enraged Lord Henri, as the vampire, Albert Henri, gnashed his bloody teeth and flamed his ruby eyes. In a final hellish outrage, Long John smiled. He thrust his hemlock crutch into the vampire lord's own vile heart as both vampire and pirate went over the ship's rail and plunged into the sea. Both swirled to the haunted fathoms of infinite darkness beneath